Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the virtual open house this evening. My name is Danny Szpiro. I'm the Dean of the School of Professional Programs, and we're looking forward to a fun and informative evening today, or this evening I should say, with President David Yellen and of Marist College. And David, if you want to offer some greetings.
Well, just welcome everyone. This is our third time doing this, Danny, I believe. And
yes.
Hopefully the audience is enjoying it, and look forward to our conversation and questions from folks viewing it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for making the time to be available to our adult undergraduate students and our distance education graduate students, David. And just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. For those of you who are logged in, you will notice that in the interface that you have is a chat area. And what we would ask is that when you have some questions, you could start typing now if you'd like. If you could put your questions in the chat area. Off camera, Jen Becker, who's the Assistant Director of Student Services, is reading those questions, and she'll repeat those questions for David's benefit when that part of our discussion comes up a little bit later this evening. So do start typing your questions. Jen could see them all lined up over there, and I look forward to answering some of your questions if I can in my role with the School of Professional Programs. And of course, I certainly encourage you to take advantage of asking David questions at the institution level that are on your mind. So on that note, why don't we begin with a few questions, David, that I brought for you, as a matter of fact, that's a reflection of some of the things going on at Marist today. And one that I'm sure virtually everybody who's dialed in today is aware of, because it's right on the Marist College website, is the recent announcement of the Marist plan in partnership with HealthQuest to create a medical school. So perhaps, David, you could give us a bit more detail about how that came about and the steps moving forward.
Sure. So these discussions began a little over 2 years ago, right after I started, between HealthQuest and us. And as people know, we recently got into the health sciences with the physician assistant master's program, which started in the spring of 2016, right before you and I started. And then this past year, our doctorate in physical therapy. So we've been strategically moving into health sciences. And HealthQuest actually brought up the idea of potentially starting a medical school because it fit into their growth and expansion plans. Anyone in Poughkeepsie, you can't drive down Route 9 without seeing this behemoth building addition they're putting on to Vassar Brothers Hospital. And they also are starting a residency program for graduates of medical schools from around the country, all part of their strategy to become more of a high-level regional academic medical center. And their idea, suggested to us, was that a medical school would have numerous benefits to each institution and the community, help attract high-level doctors to live and work in the area, to raise our academic reputation, and a lot of other potential benefits. So we studied this very carefully for 2 years, and both boards of trustees approved it, and we're now in the active phase in the next steps. Mm-hmm. So it's going to take, the plan is to enroll the first students in the summer of 2022, a little less than 4 years from now. And between now and then, we need to hire a dean and faculty and staff, build a building, build out a curriculum, obtain various accreditations. So there's a lot of work to be done, but we're well underway, and it's a very exciting prospect.
Well, that really is exciting. And I remember at one of the meetings where this was discussed, to put this in context, we're in a pretty small group for private universities or colleges in the United States now with medical schools, isn't that right?
That's right. There's about 150 MD to granting programs in the country, and only about 40 of them are affiliated with private colleges or universities. So it is a very small group that we're really excited to be part of.
Well, that's wonderful, and certainly, as you mentioned, it raises the academic breadth of the college and our profile as well, and reputationally.
And we also think it'll be really good for the city of Poughkeepsie and the region. The economic impact of the med school will be very significant. And again, it'll bring into the area a lot of people who will live here and stay here after school, and people working here. So there's a lot of enthusiasm in the community for this as well.
Since you mentioned on that list, a very kind of almost overwhelming list of things that have to be done in less than 4 years about building a new facility for the medical school, for those of you who do have a chance to come on campus once in a while, you know that there's been no shortage of construction going on around the Marist College campus for a number of years. So I'm curious if there's any thoughts about where physically that facility might be located.
Yes, and this is going to be a little different than what we've been doing recently, in that it's really HealthQuest that's going to build this building with our involvement, but they're building it and paying for it, and it'll be located adjacent to Vassar Brothers Hospital, about 5 minutes from campus.
Oh.
Medical students, after their classroom component, spend their education in the hospital on rotations with doctors and going back and forth from the classroom to the lab to the clinical setting. So given that we're not in the same location exactly, although we're very close, we all thought it made more sense to be adjacent to the hospital.
Well, that makes a lot of sense for the students or residents, as the case may be, to be able to move back and forth.
Right.
Right. Well, that's very exciting. I'm sure we'll all be looking forward to seeing how that progresses and all the wonderful benefits that will accrue to Marist as we move closer to launching the medical school. Talking about other new initiatives, I had another question for you, again, which many of the people who are connected tonight might be aware of, but Marist recently acquired space on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. We actually bought a floor of an office building, and that's very exciting. In particular for the school professional programs, thinking about adult and continuing education. But perhaps you could give us a sense of the strategy behind it and the bigger picture view of how that facility in Manhattan will help Marist achieve its goals.
Sure. Well, you know, of course, we've had some presence in Manhattan for many years. And for a long time, there was a notion that strategically it would be good for us to expand our presence in Manhattan. And in fact, I recall that when I interviewed for the presidency, the job description that was crafted in listing some of the likely priorities of the next president mentioned expansion in Manhattan. And so when I got here, we began to talk about it in a little more earnest and planning, and really made it a priority to find space to launch programs there. It morphed into purchasing rather than leasing after some thought and study. Obviously investing in New York real estate is A, expensive, but B, tends to be a really good investment over time. And so we decided ultimately, the Board of Trustees, to go the purchasing rather than the leasing route. So we have a beautiful space, 18,000 square feet on Fifth Avenue between 37th and 38th. So it's easy walking distance to both Penn Station and Grand Central for people who will be going home to the suburbs after being in our space. And right now it's being built out. It was empty space. We designed a layout, and that's being constructed right now, and it'll be launched in January. So we're going to use it for a lot of things. We're going to offer degree and non-degree certificate programs. Lots of our programs, like in your school and in cybersecurity and fashion, lots of our great programs have such applicability to people in the working world that we think we're going to be very successful in drawing in new students who will take classes or parts of degree programs or blended, classroom and online programs based in Manhattan. So that'll be the sort of core activity and the revenue producing activity to pay for this. And then we'll have lots of other uses for it too, everything from admissions events to career services events, to mentoring opportunities and classes from Poughkeepsie going down to hear speakers, and then all kinds of alumni activity as well. So it's it's a, another big expansion for us, but all part of our strategic direction to selectively grow in areas where higher ed is expanding and where we have some great strength.
That's wonderful. And I know you mentioned alumni activities. Given the concentration of Marist alums in the metro New York City area,
Yeah.
I think that'll be a really important way to strengthen our alumni relations.
I've already had many alums ask me, will I be able to have meetings there and things like that, and we're working out a plan to accommodate that kind of activity as well.
Well, I can say, I'm sure you visited the space many times. I've had a chance to visit it as well, and I can say that it really is an incredible space. And it's interesting the way it worked out, viewing the space before any of that construction started, so you can get this sort of 360 glass view that it's on the 14th floor of the building that David described, but thankfully there isn't really any buildings right up against the 14th floor, so there's a lot of daylight. It's in views of the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building, so it's
lots of light, lots of nice views.
Yeah.
People are going to be really, it's an inspiring kind of space.
Yeah, and I know that the plans are to make the space very flexible with moving walls, and so the large events and more intimate events can all be held in there.
Right, because we're going to use it for everything from small meetings to small to mid-sized classes to larger social type events. Yeah. So yeah, we're designing it in a very flexible way.
Yeah. Well, it's very exciting, and it's going to be, as you said, they're swinging hammers and sawing things right now, so it'll be available for not that distant future, sooner than the medical school.
No, just a couple months. Yeah, New York should be ready in January.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I thought I see Jen tells us we have a question. Is that related to one of the things we've been talking about? Yes, so.
Yes. Make sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Jen.
This question came in and I thought there was some technical difficulty, so I apologize if I'm a little delayed. It comes from Carly, and she was asking about the medical school, that she noticed despite the general positive reception towards the medical school that many students, including herself, are nervous about the possibility of an increase in the undergrad tuition. Is there a concern about a large tuition increase for anyone else?
There will be no tuition increase related to the medical school. So there's nothing to that, sort of separate pipelines, and shouldn't be a concern.
Great. Well, that's comforting, I guess, for people who aren't sure how the finances would work. Great. There was one other topic that I'd like to ask you about, David, and we'll continue to open the channel for anybody who's posting a question for Jen to read. But I know that recently there was an initiative to launch a campus climate survey for faculty and staff and students, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that initiative. I know you had a cover letter that went out with it, but maybe talk about that initiative and how it fits in with the strategic plan.
Sure. Well, this idea was brought to the administration, and we supported it, and it's a fairly common thing for a number of colleges and universities to do this, which is to survey the members of the community, faculty, staff, and students, on issues about the campus climate, particularly as it relates to race and ethnicity and gender and sexual orientation. How are we doing as a place that wants to be diverse and inclusive? Mm-hmm. And this survey will provide a lot of useful information about what's working well, what areas that we need to work on, and things like that. So the survey just got started recently, and it'll run for a few weeks, I believe, and certainly encourage people to take the 15 or 20 minutes that it'll take to fill out the survey instrument. It's all anonymous, and then we'll be gathering the data, and the committee and the administration will have public events to talk about the results and plan some initiatives coming out of that. And this ties into, as you mentioned, the strategic plan. Being a more diverse and inclusive college and community is one of the highlighted goals in the strategic plan, and this should be a useful tool in gathering information to help structure our approach to that going forward.
Well, and those are important goals, and this is very helpful data from the entire community to understand where initiatives should be focused. Jen, do you have a question?
We do. This one comes from Karen, and this goes along the lines with all the improvements and upgrades that Marist has been making. And she was wondering, was there any plan on addressing those physically challenged with better access, closer parking, more working elevators, and benches along those pathways to rest?
Yeah, let's take those one at a time. Parking is a challenge, is always a challenge. You know, every city institution I know has issues with congestion in elevators. Every suburban or rural school has issues about parking. And we're a fairly compact campus, and there just isn't space to create new parking. So we are beginning to think about options, you know, in getting people around campus or to off-site parking, and we're working on some proposals in that regard. Elevators, I'm not aware of any planning about any new elevators. I mean, the newer buildings have included elevators. The third thing about benches, and that's a great idea, and I really would like to see more, both for students with disabilities and in general. I want to see more areas on campus where people can sit and congregate and talk, and so we're talking about a number of initiatives, to make the campus is very beautiful, obviously, but there's a balance between wanting it to look park-like, but also to be a lived space as well. So we're working on some plans for that.
Oh, that's great. Well, and obviously a lot of care has gone into the development of the campus, and
Yeah.
I'm sure similar care is going into that consideration.
Yeah, obviously our campus is really a special place, and it's a big draw to prospective students, and every step we take, whether it's a new or renovated building or some other change, we want to keep it, we want to continue to keep it one of the most beautiful campuses in the country.
Okay. We have a couple of questions coming in. Some of them are follow-ups to threads we've started, so I apologize if we go back and forth a little. We had a follow-up from the medical school question, curious about how HealthQuest and Marist are paying or funding the development of this medical school.
Yeah, good question. Starting medical school is expensive. We're estimating that aside from the building, it'll take, let me talk about the steps. Between now and 2022, there will be no revenue, but increasing expenses as we hire a dean and faculty and staff and all of that. From 2022 to 2030 or 32, the enrollment in the medical school will be increasing. So we'll start with 60 students in a class, and over time we'll about double that. And then it'll take a few more years after that to have the whole school, all 4 years, be at the 120 or 125 students. So during that phase, there'll be tuition revenue as well as expenses. And then after that, after 2030 or thereabouts, the school will be in a steady state where it's essentially a break-even proposition. So not counting the building, it's going to be about $100 million of investment in operational subsidy to get the med school up and running, accredited, through the period of lower enrollment to this steady state. And we're going to be splitting that cost with HealthQuest. They're paying for the building, so they're investing way more than we are in that. And we're going to pay for that in several ways. We generate an operating surplus every year. We're carefully structured to do that. That's how we've been able to build such a beautiful campus, for example, without going heavily into debt or anything like that. So we'll use some of our annual operating surplus to pay for the medical school development. And then we're already actively starting fundraising efforts. A medical school opens a lot of doors to people who will want to support that enterprise. And we think we'll be quite successful in defraying a lot of the startup costs through fundraising over the next few years.
Mm-hmm. Well, that outreach for a benefactor of sorts is certainly considering the limited number of medical schools, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, this is a unique opportunity for some outreach and that kind of support.
Yeah, so for example, Hofstra Medical School started about 8-10 years ago. Similarly, a partnership between a university and a regional a regional hospital system, very similar model. And just in the last year or so, they got a naming gift, I think it was $50 or $60 million for a family to put their name on medical school, and we'll certainly be, over time, pursuing that same path. So anyone watching, if you have any tips, people who might be interested in supporting this really worthy undertaking, please let us know.
Oh, that's great. Well, a unique opportunity, yes.
Questions are still coming. So we're still talking about the medical school a little bit here. With all these advancements, will Marist consider becoming a university? And can you talk about the difference between a college classification and a university
Yeah, so,
classification?
functionally, Marist is a university. We have around 5,000 traditional undergrads, about 500, right, in adult degree students.
Undergrad.
Undergrad, and then about a little less than 1,000 graduate students.
Right.
So when you have 1,000 graduate students, you're really a university no matter what you call yourself. New York has some particular rules, so even if we haven't spent any time thinking about this really, because we couldn't call ourselves a university if we wanted to. In New York, and this is very unusual, most states don't regulate names like this, but in New York, to be a university, you have to have 3 doctoral level programs. And we have 1, our doctorate in physical therapy. The medical school will be a 2nd. And someday I imagine we'll have a 3rd, and at that time we'll actively consider whether to change our name, but as of now, it's not in the cards. It's also not hugely significant in that it doesn't really change much, it's a label. There is an argument if we were able to change the name, we should think about it because the label of university probably more accurately reflects who we are today. But we'll see. There's no rush on any of that.
Well, it's interesting that since I've joined Marist, a handful of times people have asked me the question about why college, why not university, and the interesting legal artifact in New York State about that there's actually conditions in order to use the word university is. I'm not familiar with any other jurisdiction.
If we were in New Jersey or Connecticut, for example, there's no similar regulation.
Right. Yeah. So there you go, some little legal trivia that probably didn't know about.
Yeah.
We have more follow-ups with HealthQuest. Do you think they will continue to be a major player in the field in the next 4 to 10 years? Since Amazon recently released plans to bring healthcare into the home, how do you think this might impact our partnership with them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and underlying it is the big picture of what's the future of healthcare. And the only thing anyone knows with certainty is that healthcare is changing pretty dramatically. HealthQuest is a very successful regional hospital system. They have 4 hospitals. Vassar Brothers is the biggest, but they're in the process of merging with Western Connecticut Health Network, which has 3 hospitals. So when that combination is finished, the HealthQuest will be about a $2.5 billion a year entity. It's a not-for-profit like us, but way bigger than us. So they're very strong, very healthy, growing. So whatever changes occur, I was just at a retreat they held, and they're very much thinking about these kinds of questions about the future, future of healthcare, government regulation, technology, changes in the private sector. They're well aware of those trends and will be, like us, adapting for the future. So can't tell you exactly what the future is, but we're very confident that they're a very strong partner as the next years unfold. Now, I will say also on the topic of technology that together we're committed to making this medical school one of the most advanced technological medical schools excuse me, in the country. And in particular, we know that we're in the early phases of artificial intelligence transforming healthcare. Think about something like cancer diagnosis. You know, a doctor, no matter how experienced, can only have so much information in their brain at a time, and obviously a computer is incredibly good at pattern recognition. So if you plug in all readings from exams and things, you know, a computer will be better ultimately than a human in saying the likelihood that a patient is suffering from one condition and not another, or the interaction of two conditions. So this is in the very early stages, but it's going to dramatically transform medicine. And we're going to build that into our curriculum from day one. One of the advantages of being a new medical school at this moment of such dramatic changes in technology, it's easier to build in an approach like that from the beginning than to try and change an established program.
Oh, that's a great opportunity. Yeah. Well, any other questions, Jen?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Well, one of the questions I know that I had been asked, this actually might be one that I can answer, but the question asked by some students earlier before coming downstairs, or upstairs, I should say, to the studio, has to do with the new initiative for our adult undergraduate students for a study abroad course. And this is something that, in fact, Marist is quite famous for the very high participation of our undergraduate students in study abroad opportunities. Obviously, Florence creates, our Florence campus creates a great opportunity for that many of the traditional undergraduates take advantage of, including their entire freshman year as an option there. But the format, the traditional format for study abroad makes it very difficult for adult students who are maintaining their careers in order to have that similar experience. Well, thanks to Professor Joanna Hike of the School of Professional Programs working very hard to put together a study abroad course that would fit into an adult student's structure. We have just launched, and in fact it'll be linked right on the School of Professional Programs webpage perhaps tomorrow or later this week, a study abroad opportunity that fits inside the spring break in March, which is I think approximately a week to 10 days long for a study abroad opportunity, going to the Dominican Republic for a course focused on essentially a history and course. And more details will be available on the website. In fact, now if you want to be a little bit, use some ingenuity, if you search right now on the Marist web page for Adult Abroad, that will take you to the web page where that information is, and we're just building it into the menu formats now so that you can click on it right from the left-hand pane on the School of Professional Programs page. But that's very exciting, and hopefully with several months of advance notice, the adult students can start arranging their schedules accordingly to take advantage of this.
Very exciting. That's great.
Yes, it's something that we get asked about.
Yeah.
But of course, as soon as students typically start thinking about it, reality sets in about how complicated it might be to do this. So this is a compact format that Joanna's put together that I think will be accessible for many of our adult students.
Makes sense, because a lot of more traditional classes do immersion trips over breaks in a similar way. So that is a good model, I think, for adult students.
Right. Well, I know we've had a number of, quite a few questions coming in from the medical school, which of course is a fascinating new initiative. Any other questions queued up at the moment, Jen? Okay.
Not at the moment.
We could also just mention, you know, for people who haven't been on campus lately, a couple other developments here, just to pass along. The steel plant studio is just about finished. You know, we took the original building where the art program had been and completely renovated that core, and then built a big addition around it, increasing the space by 3 times or something. And it's a spectacular new space, and the fashion program will move in there with the art program. And that's just about finished, and will open also in January. So I think it'll be a real signature space on campus for a couple of our really dynamic, wonderful programs.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what's interesting about the fashion and the art program that we can use that space is they need a lot of large open spaces
Right.
for fashion shows or art shows or studios. So I've had my nose pressed up to the glass at the steel plant, seeing how that's coming together. It looks like it'll be fantastic space for those kinds of program needs.
Yeah, I can't wait to see, some art shows there and fashion. Fashion work there. It's going to be really great for those two programs.
Mm-hmm. We do have another question now, Jen tells me.
Yeah, so this question is about the Raymond Rich Institute. Are there any more future plans of utilizing it or making more use of it currently to the students?
Yeah, well, there's two related things, and I'm not sure the question was phrased in a way that could be either or both. There's the Raymond Rich Leadership Institute, which is programmatic, and affiliated with that is the Payne Mansion, which Mr. Rich donated to the college almost 10 years ago. And the mansion, is this amazing spot across the river, a few miles up the river on the other side. And we use that for leadership activities and events and speakers of various types. And it's really a wonderful showcase, a great place for certain kinds of events. The Leadership Institute, we're actually now in the process of advertising to soon hire a director of that program. We have a lot of great leadership activity across our schools and across disciplines, but we need a staff in place to help organize and prioritize and promote. So we're about to, by the next time we do one of these discussions, we'll have someone in place, and they'll be planning additional activities and organizing some themes for our leadership work.
Oh, well, that's great news. I mean, certainly, speaking about the school professional programs for a moment, because of our long-standing focus on organizational leadership as part of the liberal studies and now professional studies major, that would be an obvious opportunity for some collaboration, and certainly would look forward to that as a new leader or director for that institute is hired.
Along the lines of all the building upgrades and usage, we have a question about, are there any plans to upgrade the Diesen building? It seems to be the last one on the list currently.
Very astute question. So since I've been here, since we've been here, a little over 2 years, we finished the 4 North Campus dorms, and they're now fully occupied.
And beautiful.
We're now essentially finished with the steel plant. The McCann Center is under renovation and expansion now. That work just started this summer and it'll take about 18 months. And then the next major project is the Diesen Center. We have been interviewing architects. We're about to select an architect, and the plan will be to start work next summer. Again, it'll take probably about 18 months, and it will essentially be renovating, almost a gut renovation of the current Diesen Center and the building of an addition to it to significantly enhance the amount and quality of space. So it's, as the questioner notes, that is the academic building on campus that is lagging behind the others, and that's just kind of, there's always a cycle to these things. Some building is going to be new and some building is going to be old. And it's the Diesen Center's turn to get a major refresh, renovation, expansion. Saw some really exciting ideas for what that expansion and renovation might look like, and that's on the table to begin next summer.
That's great. Well, there we go. So good things come to those who wait, I suppose, and certainly there's been, considering the waiting, I'm sure it'll be really good.
Yeah.
We love our building questions. We also note that the McCann Center is getting some great changes and upgrades. Is this interrupting or causing any interruptions for the athletic activities, and if we had to slow down anything with our sports or, the things that we do?
Yeah, so the McCann Center, needed a significant renovation as well, and we knocked down the auxiliary gym, the gray gym as people knew it. The floor was sagging and there were braces on the walls. It was not exactly a safety hazard, but it wasn't in good shape. So that building was knocked down, and there'll be a new auxiliary gym built. And then all of the space for cardio equipment and weights and meeting rooms, all of that is being renovated and expanded. Locker rooms. The main arena where the basketball teams and the volleyball team play, that's not being touched. But everything else in the building will essentially be new when we're finished. And so there is some disruption. There's no way around it. You know, we're short a gym for intramurals, so there's some stresses there for the next year. And then in terms of workout facilities, cardio and weights, people are having to be a little bit adaptive. In other words, that main large central facility isn't there for this year and a half. However, we have almost as much workout space as we did a year ago because we added a temporary facility outside of the McCann Center. And I've been in there. It's a nice big space. It's sort of a permanent tent and all kinds of equipment in there. And then the new dorms up on the north end of campus, Building D, has a workout facility in it, which is getting a lot of great use. And then on the east side of campus, Marketplace, we expanded the workout facilities there. So there's a lot of great options to minimize the disruption while we're doing this much needed and what will be a great renovation of McCann.
I've seen the artist conceptions or the drawings of what McCann should look like when it's finished, and it'll be very impressive. I think it'll be.
So as you can tell, you know, a lot of activity at the college on the physical side, and each of these things is a complicated move that requires adjusting a lot of pieces to get things done as quickly as possible with as little disruption as possible. But there is disruption when you're renovating an existing space. And then a lot of development on the academic program side as well.
So this next question is going to switch gears just a little bit. It comes from someone who's in the professional studies major, which is a strategic growth of the college, these continuing ed adult distance programs. And currently, the student feels that the name of the major doesn't evoke a sense of sort of academic level, and she struggles with how to position herself at the college and what that means. What would be your best advice or answer for someone with this major and things like that? So it might be a question more for Danny.
Yeah, I want to turn this to the expert in the subject.
Well, I'll start the response by pointing out that what we refer to today as the professional studies major, that's actually the third name of that program since it was created in 1983. The overarching design, while the name has changed, the overarching design of what is essentially the adult undergraduate degree completion major has not changed, in that it was designed to be a very flexible, very adaptable, transfer credit friendly program that would allow a variety of students to find a path that could be unique to their own interests through this major. The original name was called Integrative Studies, and the idea is that within the major, everybody had to have 2 or 3 concentrations or areas of study with a minimum of 12 and a maximum of 24 credits each. That's still true today, 35 years later. Interestingly, though, the same, what is reflected in your question, the same issue came up about 20 years after the Integrative Studies major was created, and in the early 2000s it was felt that the label Integrative Studies was not necessarily readily understood, and the decision was made in around the mid-2000s to change the name to Liberal Studies. Now, the program continued under that name for a number of years, and I have to, I'll put myself out here saying that when I arrived, and the program was still called Liberal Studies, But it was possible, of course, when we think about traditional liberal, the title as it invokes, thinking about traditional liberal arts and science disciplines or topics, it was actually possible to put together areas of concentration in the major that were not liberal arts and science in nature. Things like IT management or organizational studies. So liberal studies, the feedback was coming back from many people, actually was kind of pointing in the wrong direction for what for most people was a very pragmatic career-related choice to complete an undergraduate degree. So looking for other precedents in the undergraduate adult degree completion space, the other choice that is not unique to Marist, it's part of this space, was the label professional studies. And after doing some market research and conferring with our admissions folks, the decision was made to change the name of the major again, so the third time in the history of this major, to professional studies, to better reflect what ultimately we feel is the motivation and the goals of the students within this major who are focused on adult undergraduate degree completion. Now, for those students who were, this change, by the way, became official for students who were enrolling for their first enrollment in the fall of 2017. So we're actually just starting our second academic year now with the new name. For any students who were previously enrolled in when they began under liberal studies, and this, by the way, was true for even integrative studies, those students were given the choice, as long as they make that choice before their last semester, to retain the name of the major under which they enrolled, or to ask for the major on their diplomas and their transcript to be changed to professional studies. Hopefully that covers sort of the history and the mechanics of, and the rationale and motivation of why we made that change. But to sum up, we just felt it was a label that better reflected the career orientation, the career motivation of the people we're attracting to the program.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions at the moment, Jen?
Not yet.
Yeah. Good. Well, David, we're coming up into about 45 minutes or so, which is, I think, a lot of time. We covered a lot of ground, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity if there's any closing comments or anything that you'd like to talk about or some thoughts to leave everybody with as we wrap up.
Well, I really like this mechanism for letting us reach our adult students, our online students, and appreciate their participation. A lot going on at the college, obviously. I hope you feel increasingly a part of it, whether you're here physically much or not. I'd encourage you to take a look at our strategic plan. A lot of the things we're doing grow out of our new strategic plan, which is available on our website. And we love to have feedback on what else you'd like to see us do and ways that we can and should improve what we're doing now. So thank you.
Well, thank you, David, and I just want to echo what you said regarding feedback. I guess all of us these days, as we make our way through our lives, are being asked always for our opinion. You can't buy something or fill up your car without being asked to fill out a survey. But I can't talk about those other surveys, but I can certainly say here at Marist, when we ask for feedback, when we ask for your thoughts, we couldn't be more sincere in our intention and our use of that information to guide a lot of decision making. Even the little story I gave about the change of the major was after careful consultation. So I want to reiterate what David said about our sincere request and our sincere outreach for you to share any of your thoughts. And by the way, feel free, for those of you who ultimately will watch this as a recording, which we'll post within the next few days on Marist's YouTube channel. So if you're not watching this live, David has found the time to do this now 3 times over the last year and a half, and we'll continue to do in the future. So store up your questions, send them to Jen Becker. We will certainly have those questions in inventory when we have another one of these, most likely in the spring semester. So on that note, David, thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny.
A pleasure seeing you this evening.
You
Thank
too.
you for your time. Thank you Jen for coordinating the event tonight and for reading the questions. And of course, thank you to our wonderful team in the broadcast studio behind the cameras for making this evening work so well. And thank you, all the students who logged on this evening and posed questions for us, for your engagement and your continued connection with the college. So have a wonderful evening, everybody, and thanks again. Bye-bye.